Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? It is Wednesday, July 10th. Welcome back, grannies and gators, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know what's going on in clown worlds today? Well, we're going to have a special treat today. Most of you guys have been hearing of the rumblings in the Mockingbird media about the far right shift in Europe. And we have none other but our friend Jim Ferguson from Freedom Train International joining us today to give us from the horse's mouth what the heck is going on over there, Jim. We're getting bombarded with this far right panic shift. We're seeing Nigel Farage, having this out of left field, completely upsetting the apple cart in the UK. I don't even know where to start, Jim. Let's just let you start with that. And for folks that maybe have been living under a rock a little bit, Jim joined us for some international panels, talking and comparing notes about some of the travesties befalling all of our nations and where there seem to be all originating in the same source, and how we're fighting back and pushing back from the differences in continents and all of those things. So it's been a minute, Jim. Tell us where we need to start, and from where we left off to where we're at here now. Things have been happening so fast.
It is happening at pace now. There's a lot of things going on, not just in the UK, but of course in Europe as well. But with regards to Nigel Farage, what really happened was a bit of a game changer, because just a few weeks ago, in a very surprise announcement, he actually said he is taking back the leadership of Reform UK. Now, Reform UK, in its former iteration, was actually the Brexit Party, which I was a parliamentary candidate with Europe and Westminster with as well. Right. So that really set things ablaze, because when Nigel stepped back into that leadership role, it ignited a firestorm within mainstream media and in social media and on platforms all across the UK. And what he's actually done is he has come in from the way back in the rear, and he's now been elected as Clacton MP, along with now five MPs now being returned to the British Parliament, in a game changer. They never thought this would happen.
Well, forgive our ignorance over here a little bit. I think people over here get very confused in how the parties are named and who they actually represent over there. There's it's very confusing. We think over here, liberals, conservatives, or Democrats, Republicans, and we look at, when we're looking at election results and things like that, we really don't necessarily get the nuances of what that actually means. People here are familiar with Nigel from the Brexit campaign, his support for Trump during Trump's first administration, and then it was like Nigel was disposable after that, and he just kind of. I think that he was kind of thrown out with the trash and the turmoil kind of thing, and never given credit to that he would ever have sway or influence in politics again in the UK or anywhere for that matter. But that's not the case.
Well, to sort of put it into context, the Brexit Party were staunch Brexiteers, not all Conservatives or United Kingdom Independence Party type people. There was actually a lot of people from the traditional Labour left that actually also believed in Brexit. In fact, a good 40 to 45% of my colleagues and candidates, although I'm from the right, they were actually from the traditional left. And that was an interesting mix. I learned a huge amount, because when I first joined the party, I suddenly found myself sitting down with people who were from the traditional left. And I thought, I don't know how this is going to work out. But I became incredibly good friends with them. We didn't necessarily agree on every single point, but on the big issues, we definitely did. And that's an important lesson to learn, Wayne.
It really is. And I think that's what makes this such an interesting study, is that when, for as much attempt that they wanted this homogenous planet with this one world government, when push comes down to shove and it really comes down to a national crisis, people can have an ability to put their partisanship away and do what is necessary, what is necessary, or what is correct for their people. And I think that is the thing that gets lost in all of this, is that there is this ability to come together on significant matters and have diplomacy. That's the diplomacy that has been removed from every situation. It's either my way or else, until diplomacy is forced. And that's kind of where I think Brexit, kind of made that distinction, and that was the first time that in recent years that I'd seen a nonpartisan issue, and they went to bat for it. Took 3 tries, even, which was such a significant indicator of the people's will behind this. They would not let this go, and it was absolutely a nonpartisan issue. And I think that is kind of, that feeling might be what's driving some of this shift again, not just in the UK, but in fact all across Europe.
Well, I've spent some time traveling to Switzerland, Geneva. I've been in the Netherlands twice now. I'm about to head back again for a 3rd trip. I went to the Denmark after that. Now, I've been meeting with a lot of freedom fighters, Dutch farmers, other farmers, people that believe in freedom, people that want to live their lives in peace. And we are building. Freedom Trade International is fairly young in its history. We only really started in January, February this year. But already we have multiple thousands of members all across the United States. Canada is a big part of our movement. Then again, we've got the UK, and now we're starting to build up a huge head of steam in Europe. So we've got members in Denmark, the Netherlands, France, Germany, Sweden, Norway. The list is extensive. And what I'm doing is, because you mentioned something very important there, Wayne, you talked about unity. And that's really one of my skill sets, if you like. I bring people together. I find the common ground. We might not agree on every single thing. I don't expect people to agree with every point of view that I have. And it's the same the other way around. But what we do agree on are the principal foundations of freedom, anti-censorship, telling the truth, and having politicians that are principled and put their own nations first. And of course, you've seen the uniparty system operating over there. And that's why I would watch Reform UK very closely, because the Conservatives, they've just had their worst election defeat ever. I mean, this is an electoral wipeout. And of course, Labour came in with an electoral landslide, but not because people particularly like Keir Starmer or the Labour Party. This was a massive protest vote against the Conservatives, who have become globalist in their policies.
I think this is so fascinating, because I think if I were to predict anything, I would predict that Canada is going to go through the exact same elections scenario here coming up, when they do finally call an election. They don't want to, but they're kind of the same situation there. They're being forced to, just due to civil discontent. And I would almost argue that although this might have been the worst drubbing in a victory, this might also be the worst victory that they have ever gotten, because this is going to be the most challenging time that they're ever going to have in power, simply because Nigel Farage is now the guy on the other side of the table, and Nigel is not afraid to do anything in front of the camera, or to say what needs to be said, as we've seen quite often. So I think that those people that were celebrating earlier this week are going to be ruining the day they actually won very, very soon. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing happening, is that challenge to the status quo, where they do not have this unending ability to quash opposition.
Well, what they did to Nigel Farage in freezing his bank accounts prior to all of this really provoked him, just the same as they did to the Freedom Convoy and the Freedom Movement in Canada, with those dirty tricks and dirty tactics by the Trudeau regime. And, you can do that to somebody, but you better be prepared for the pushback. Well, he's pushing back. And I would say, looking at the election results, Wayne, the Conservatives came a poor third pretty much in every seat, and Reform UK came a very good second. So what I think was going to happen now is, if the right truly unites with Conservative people, Reform people, people in the United Kingdom Independence Party, if those parties that feel the same as us actually unite behind or with Reform UK at the 2029 election, we could see them as the official opposition or even winning the election outright. And I think the Conservative Party, as they were known, as they were sort of, branded, are done. I think they've had such a massive defeat that many existing MPs near the time may actually defect, and Reform UK could be the ones that really move it forward. You're right about Nigel Farage. He's not frightened to speak his mind, but also he's one of the most powerful orators you could ever
Yes.
see in a public debate. I used to love watching him, even before I joined the Brexit Party. I used to love watching him in the European Parliament, running circles around Juncker and all these other Europhiles. He just made a real mockery of them. But he did it in a way where it was quite clear what he was saying was absolutely right. So yes, a big change is coming, I think.
There are a few people that have the ability to absolutely destroy somebody while they believe they're being fed syrup and honey, and Nigel has that ability, and I've always been a fan of that. Even
Yeah.
in his interim, if there was one person that I would have loved to have interviewed just because of his ability to articulate and describe and share stories, he's been on the top of my to interview list for years and years and years now. But I think that this is, incredibly indicative of what we're seeing. And this is where it comes to, how I introduced, this, everybody over here is calling it the shift to the far right, the shift, warning everybody over here in Europe. Europe's in trouble with this shift to the far right. But I look at this and people are finally, and this is important to discuss, and I want to get your feelings on this. And first, I'm going to give you my kind of quick synopsis on this. Is that shift? We're seeing this massive lurch, not even just a shift, a lurch in the UK. But people are starting to understand that the entire European Union basically operates as a vassal proxy state for the American oligarchy. And that is actually what is, I think, driving this shift to the far right. Because, just like in the UK, nobody in Europe wants what these guys are driving the bus towards, all under this, international rules-based order. And I think that is the bottom line of what is driving this shift. It has, yeah, and the other thing that bugs me, this far right populism is dangerous. That's democracy. Why is democracy dangerous? They scream, we got to protect democracy, but we've got to eliminate the popular vote. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean, I would argue, because as I said to you, in the Brexit Party, there was a good 40 to 45% of people involved who are from the traditional Labour left, and they used to laugh when they were talked about as being far right because they're anything but. I mean, I believe in moderation. I'm pretty much in the centre ground, a little bit to the right. And of course, your views on different things will change either to the left or
yep.
to the right about different issues. Could be education, could be healthcare, could be immigration, whatever it is. So really, I think most people are actually somewhere around the centre. And instead of calling people far right, they're just right. And most of these people that I've met and talked to in Ireland, they're not far right. They're not extremists.
Exactly.
They're ordinary men and women who work hard, pay their taxes, love their families, and want the best for them. And yet they get labelled far right extremists when in actual fact, they're just ordinary people like you and I who want justice and fairness and an end to the corruption in politics.
Well, and that's the disservice that they do themselves when they label us far right, and then the next sentence is, we have to protect democracy from this far right shift. And people, these average people, are going, wait a minute, this is the popular vote. This has nothing to do with right or left. This is democracy in action, and they don't like it. So this is, the threats. So they have to label and denigrate and make everybody seem and sound dangerous. And I think that is what, John Cube, average person all across Europe, all of the countries that, and it's kind of a bit of a reverse effect. I think, these European
Yeah.
countries, the average person is going, why are we following American will to the bottom of the ocean? And we're over here going, why are we following Geneva's will to the bottom of the ocean? And it's really them flipping the coin on us when it's really the same situation, on all sides of the continent. It's literally the same thing. The people want sanity. They don't want the left and the right. I would have always been considered myself a middle of the road guy. I was never either which way. I didn't even really care about politics until they started to, attack me because I didn't care, because I
Mm.
wasn't a sycophant and bobbing and nodding my head. Then I became, what they call, a dangerous populist far right. I'm like, what does that even mean? If I'm what that means, I'm okay with that. And so I think this is the correction that we're going to be seeing, and that I don't think is going to be a fad or anything else like that. I'm seeing some headlines referring to the new government in the Netherlands as being a flash in the pan. They'll get it right, next time. But I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'm going to be heading to Germany probably in the next few weeks. Got some work to do there, and of course, Germany has seen the Alternative for Deutschland party, the AfD, now officially the biggest party there, and the globalists have actually talked about banning that party because they're becoming too popular, they're too outspoken, they're going away from the globalist narrative, and so they're actually talking about banning them. And we've seen a massive, I mean, truly astounding change of events in France. And I've got a lot of friends in France as well, and speak a little bit of French, and I hear what's going on there. But Marine Le Pen is really looking like she could completely take power there. And of course, Marine Le Pen's been in this business for a long time. She's a very seasoned political operator. She's also a very good speaker. She puts her point across very, very eloquently. And I think the people in France recognize that what's been done to their country by the globalists and what's been done to many other countries like our respective nations is a similar pattern with massive illegal immigration that is done quite deliberately, Wayne, to weaken and destroy and overrun our healthcare systems, our education systems. And we've seen massive increases in crime, of course, as well. I mean, I couldn't believe you guys were getting told to leave your keys in the car so that they could just take them and not have to worry about getting into a conflict with people who are trying to steal from you. I mean, it's bizarre.
It truly is. Yeah, yeah. Their answer to crime is leave your car keys in your mailbox so anybody can steal
Yeah.
your vehicle. It's just beyond absurdity when they turn around and announce another $200 million and 330 officers for the future thought police. If you're going to think
I
about,
know.
saying something, they're going to come and lock you up. So,
Mhm.
on that note, the Online Harms Act is again one of those bright shining examples of, wait a minute, not just my country, it's every country that is under the influence of these infiltrated unelected bodies that are manifesting what I've been calling for 3 years a
Mhm.
manufactured destabilization. they're
Yeah.
they're disassembling our countries so that they can level the
Mhm.
ground and do their build back better. That's the whole point of it. And I think that is over. It is dead. And my opinion is that they're kind of retracting. It's either lose everything or save a little bit that they can. So we're seeing a bigger push in Australia and Canada as
Mhm.
the flagships for the new world order. And so I think that those two countries, ours and mine, and Australia, I think are going to be where this kind of radical globalist ideology dies first. But it's other people are watching, and people are recognizing around the world more and more and more every single day that, when it comes down to the minuscule, semantic issues, we can disagree. But if we don't come to an agreement on these existential threats or these existential influences, we're going to be in trouble. So I think Canada is going to be kind of the epicenter of the last desperate effort of these globalists to maintain some sort of semblance or some illusion of their ideological control of a nation. See, Canada's got socialism, right? They got communism figured out for the first time ever. See,
Well,
do you think I'm wrong in that?
well, yeah, they talk about the Great Reset. Klaus Schwab goes on from the World Economic Forum, goes on about the Great Reset. But the truth is, there is a great awakening taking place. People are
100%.
suddenly realizing they've been lied to about so many things. They've been controlled and psyoped to such an extent. So when I come along and I talk to people about the freedom movements, Freedom Train International, what we're doing with other freedom movements, how they're joining in with us, we're sort of coming into the sort of the umbrella organization where we handle the administration, we handle the sort of the day-to-day running of it. That frees up those freedom fighters and those leaders of those movements to do what they're really good at, which is leading and promoting the alternative lifestyles that we're looking at. I mean, we're talking about a really root and branch change for people to learn from us and to actually implement these policies within their own lives and within their own communities, because we don't actually need them. They need us. And when people start to understand that, it's going to be game over for the globalists.
I love the way you say that, because I 100% agree with you on that. So over even the last couple of months, I've really been kind of framing and the understanding a little bit differently. And whether people want to agree or not, we have to be aware of environmental issues that are impacting what's happening in our countries. We cannot get myopic and only look at what's happening in our own country, because there are global influences that impact all of this. And we spend a number of years fighting for freedom and educating people on building alternative solutions, alternative communities, because with just from an understanding that all of these edicts come from Geneva or New York, and they're kicked down the road until the municipality depends on the implementation. So it's top-down ideology, bottom-up implementation. So we've really been educating people that localism is the 100% safe and effective cure for globalism. When you eliminate the globalism from your community, that same death of the ideology moves up the scale. So we've been having a lot of growth in this basic understanding. And also, I think people, they aren't really looking at it. Whether people like Russia, China, India, any of those BRIC nations is absolutely irrelevant. What they have to be aware of is that's exactly what these countries are doing. They're done with the shenanigans coming out of the West, and they are building their own parallel economy. Whether we like it or not, they will take their losses. They will cut and run. But at this point, they're done with all of this insanity out of the West, and they're building their own independent economic and financial system, only because we forced them to, or not as people, but our leadership, or our pseudo leadership, I guess. So this is, when we're looking around, you're right. We don't need them. They absolutely need us. And the more we get into fortifying our local communities and evict them out of there, this is in essence, the globalist cabal dying on the vine, quite literally.
They are dying. Their globalist regime is won't last, because no dystopian dictatorial regime ever does. They can rise to power, they can infiltrate, they've got the money, yes, they've got the power, they've got their puppets like Trudeau in government. The same in the UK previously with Cynic. And by the way, Keir Starmer's just another globalist. He's a Davos man. I mean,
he's an even more boring one than Sunak.
Yeah, he is actually. He's often referred to as a block of wood, But I mean, at the end of the day, what we're witnessing is the death throes of the globalist empire. It's been there for a long time, let's be honest. And we've just been tricked into thinking that we actually still have democracy. We don't. Whatever party you vote for, whether it's the Conservatives or the Liberals or Labour in the UK and the Conservatives, I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting Klaus Schwab, you're getting the Trilateral Commission people, you're getting the Council of 300. They're all the same, and they're only interested in their own selves, self-enrichment. They don't care about the people way.
It's literally like the Lord of the Rings, the one ring that binds them, the UNSDA. That is the one ring that binds them all. But
when all is said and done, I mean, I have to say, one of the biggest motivations for me is starting the freedom movement, where the Canadians, the truckers and the Freedom Convoy, and what you guys, I remember watching the headlines with Chris Barber and Tamara Lich and all of these guys, and I thought, wow, who would have thought the mild-mannered Canadians would have been the ones to push it forward and to actually take a stand? But you guys did. And that's when we launched. We launched on the anniversary for Freedom Train, on the anniversary of the Freedom Convoy movement, because you guys were inspirational to everybody around the world. So don't ever think you weren't. You are, and you still are. And I've made so many friends. I mean, I was so really grateful to go to Ottawa and to meet many Canadians over there, and those involved in the freedom movement, just wonderful people. But that's where the last 15 months for me, Wayne, was a real, it was a real learning curve for me, because I learned so much about Canadian politics, what was going on there, same in America, same in Australia, New Zealand, and the same in Europe as well, because what we've got is this uniparty system. And they're just playing a game. It doesn't actually really matter who you vote in. Now, I always think it's a good thing if we can try to solve these things politically and peacefully, absolutely. But I think people are waking up to the shenanigans that's been going on with that. And the reality is, our governments and our parliaments have been deeply infiltrated by globalists. And we've got to get a root and branch review of that and get them out of power.
Well, and that infiltration took decades, and it was the go time when they secured the uniparty system under that UNSDA, and since then, the only thing that they're actually debating about when it comes for election is who gets control of stealing our wallets to implement the same attaboy list, and that's that attaboy list is the same thing in your country and in all of these countries that are under this infiltrated influence. And one of the things that you said there that has really been on my mind, where you guys are helping create infrastructure and ability and organizational structure for the freedom fighters so that people can do what they do best, which is lead. I'm seeing a distinction and evolution in where we're going here, and I think that is a key point. We can't all be freedom fighters. We need to make a transition to being freedom makers, because in the context of freedom fighting, most people, in the average level, they're fighting for what they recognize as a comfortable life 10 or 15 years ago, and that was just a more acceptable form of slavery, in my
Yeah.
opinion, where we have an opportunity in 2024, and I think 2024 is a defining year for humanity.
Yeah.
We have the real opportunity to eliminate that Hegelian process, wash, rinse, repeat, and to actually create and make freedom. So I'm seeing this need for people to cognitively understand that we don't all have to fight. Some of us are needed to build. So we can be freedom builders, freedom makers, and still at the same time being freedom fighters. And I mean, who doesn't want to be a creative person building something out of love? Not everybody wants to be a frontline warrior. So I think that this is only a growing opportunity for people to get involved.
Well, I just love that analogy. I'm a Scottish Highlander with a bit of a Norwegian Viking in my blood. So yeah, I'm a fighter, but at the same time, the fighters need that network around them, and I like to fight. It's something I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed the cut and thrust of it all. So I'm well suited to what I'm doing. But the fighters need that support around them as well. Not everybody can do what you do or I do in terms of hosting podcasts or interviewing. Some people are not comfortable with it. Some people don't feel they have the ability. Although I would always say to them, have a go. You might be surprised at what you can do. But we need people to build things, as you quite correctly said. We need people to make things, and we need people to use their knowledge and their skills to create systems, working with farmers and food producers, cutting out the middlemen. It's the supermarkets that get rich, it's not the farmers. And of course, we as the end purchasers of food products, for example, we're paying top dollar now. I mean, everybody around the world is seeing rising food prices. So it's about trying to sort of take that middleman out of it, help support our farmers, at the same time, work with them and build communities that are based on trust and mutual cooperation. We don't need the globalists. We don't need their top-down policies anymore. It's time to be free of them. And I think Freedom International has made a good start. We've a long way to go. But, we're connecting with people quite literally all around the world now.
Well, I would suggest that if we look at things, we've kind of been spent about 300 years in this same cycle, wash, rinse, repeat conflict. Both sides profit from the conflict, the starting of the conflict, the destruction, and the rebuilding, and that's exactly what they're doing here now, but through economic means rather than just static warfare. Although that is the inevitable bulldozer coming in to knock the building down. That's what static warfare does in this. And I don't think people want this anymore. I think people realize that we can live without this manifestation of war, because it's only a small group of rich people that all know each other that get into pissing matches over money, and they start wars, and then it's our friends and families that have to go and fight these things against people that they could possibly be related to and definitely don't know, in order to perpetuate this cycle. And I think that cycle itself is what we are seeing the end of in all of this. You're right. And I think back, I'm been a student of history my entire life. And although I don't want to take away from any sacrifice and any soldier, anybody that took part in defeating Germany in World War II, but at the end of the day, we have to accept the fact that we didn't win just because of bravery. We won because of manufacturing. That was the thing. And this is the same thing that makes us weak now, is we don't manufacture nearly anything in our nations when we have every ability to do so. And they have dumbed down our skilled workforces in order to justify we need skilled labor because we can't make anything anymore, while they're using our education and our skill training programs, i.e. schools and education, to teach about 72 genders. Are we ever going to make anything in our countries ever again without a drastic change right from there? Because then we can absolutely manufacture everything we need within our own countries. We don't need to send our chickens from Canada to China to have them processed so they can come back to our grocery shelves here in Canada. This is the absurdity of it all.
It is. It absolutely is. But you mentioned something quite important there, and I come from a long line of military service, but I don't like war. I'm not a pacifist. I would fight if I had to. But we have seen discussions taking place now about conscription in the UK. They're now talking about young men and women being called up for military service. I'm connected to people within the defense side of things. And they've been saying for the last 9 months that Rishi Sunak did not want to be a wartime prime minister. And he called an early election because he knew what was likely to happen. So unfortunately, it looks like we might be seeing some kind of boots on the ground in Ukraine, maybe by the autumn. It's quite concerning. Yeah.
It genuinely is. Genuinely is. That's an escalation that nobody can afford, because that's when things get absolutely out of control, and nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. I don't. And perhaps you can speak to this a little bit. And I think that the rest of the world is looking at the UK and this election and fully understanding that they got rid of one globalist to get a worse one in, because this one is far more malleable. He is far more devoted. He is far more committed to that globalist cult. So as you're suggesting, is that this might be the guy that they can manipulate into that conflict. Maybe you can explain this to me, Jim, because I've seen other people asking about this out there. How did they win so many seats, but yes, lost by the number of the vote astronomically? Because if they went by voting numbers, this clown should be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first past the post system is an inherently difficult system for smaller parties to get through. But to give you an example, Reform UK got 4 million votes. The Labour Party got 3.5 million, yet they're the ones in power. So it's that really is the point. But there is something that needs to be thought about here, and that is, as the globalists lose power, and despite controlling all the mainstream media, despite controlling that narrative with these massive budgets that they buy these people off with, including in Canada as well, people are still waking up. So they are really starting to get a little bit concerned about losing the grip that they have. And one of the ways to do that is to take us to war. When they lose, or when they think they're on the point of losing, they will take us to war. And one thing to watch very closely, perhaps even more important than what's going on in Europe and the UK right now, is what's about to happen in the United States. And there are people that want me to go over there. There's people that are keen for me to go over there and start to do the work that needs to be done there as well. But that probably will come later on in the year. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to come back to see you guys for sure. There's a lot of people I'd love to see, including yourself, Wayne. If I do get over to Canada, I'm sure we could work something out. But keep an eye on the States. Keep an eye on the States. There are rumblings there that they might try to do something that could prevent or interfere with that free and fair election. H5N1 avian influenza, for example, is being talked up now by the World Health Organization. There's headlines appearing about it being in the milk supplies, affecting eggs. And now they're saying that there's people, getting infected with it. So it's one to watch.
I fully concur. I think that America is in a very vulnerable position right now. America, over a bunch of years, did not make any real friends out there. They were bullies, and those bullies have a long memory, and they don't forget. And so I think America is in a very vulnerable position right now. And this is part and parcel of it. It's kind of exactly like it's a Trump derangement syndrome. Putting him in jail and giving him a felon record only made him 100 times more popular. It's the same thing that they tried to destroy Nigel, and anybody that's standing for the right things that the people are on. Anytime that they take one of these assaults or liberties on these people, especially the orators, because they don't have an argument, they can't argue with an orator, and so we're seeing this repeating and playing out. And I think that what we're seeing happening in America, and this is just my general thoughts and feelings on this from the altitude that I'm circling around watching this, that wasn't a debate. That was an intentional sacrifice. They're cutting their losses, and they are either going to try to manifest a civil war in the United States, or to escalate the Ukraine conflict, because then governments get crazy powers and everybody loses focus. Domestic issues don't get addressed, and everybody goes to war. And when this is the vulnerable situation that we're in right now, as it's impacted on both sides of the world. But the point that you brought up there is one that I want to address, because I'm seeing things that I'm not sure everybody else is, where I'm seeing the H1, this buzzard bug, the increased narrative. But the other side of it is understanding that propaganda only works with censorship. They are symbiotic. One does not work without the other. On the other side of that coin, I'm seeing this escalation in the labeling of us as hostile. Jim, this is the leverage. They can't threaten us with "you're going to kill grandma this time." That's not going to work again. But now anybody that disagrees with the narrative is being labeled as hostile. Vaccine hostility, all of these things. So that's the next buzzwords to justify the actions. It doesn't matter what you don't like, you're going to be deemed dangerous and hostile. And that hostile is an action word. That means immediate action. You're not angry, you're hostile. They better get somebody over there right now. This is the two sides of the next psyop narrative that really bothers me as I start to see this word being added in. We're no longer talking about vaccines. We're immediately hostile. That's scary stuff.
I mean, it's really terrifying stuff. And of course, the Canadians and the Australians, in particular in the state of Victoria, were brutalized by the state apparatus. I mean, physically assaulted, beaten, arrested. And I think Canada was probably worse, but it was pretty bad in the state of Victoria as well, and other parts of Australia. And that's something we've got to be mindful of. As they panic, as they get more desperate, they may do these things. I personally am a Trump guy. I've made no secret of that. I've always admired him. In fact, I was across 8 different states last year, just before I came over to see you guys in Ottawa and Toronto. And I traveled across from North Dakota all the way down to Denver, Colorado, and then all the way down to the south in Alabama. And I was on stage, I was speaking to people, I was giving talks, presentations, and engaging with really quite literally hundreds of people at these events for about 3 weeks solid. You know, I was up at 4 every morning. We didn't want to fly, we wanted to drive. So it was a lot of driving, but I got to see the countryside and the beautiful, beautiful, wonderful American people. And they're great, great people. I was made very welcome there. But they're deeply concerned about what's going over. You know, I spent time in what's often known as the flyover states or the forgotten states. And I think they were quite tickled with the fact that a Brit was coming over, especially a Scottish Highlander. And I met so many people that were descended from the Scots as well. So you know, wherever you go in the world, if you're Scots or Irish, you quite often find people that link into you. You know, and it was a great experience. But they are worried. They are deeply concerned, as we all are around the planet. And that's why bringing people together, preparing people for whatever might come. Because I've always believed, don't be scared, be prepared. Be prepared for whatever might happen. The more prepared you are, the less worried you are. You build a buffer. It could be food, it could be supplies, it could be money, it could be whatever. And you apply those principles and try to get out of debt. That's another big one. Try to get out of debt. We can teach people how to do that. There are very simple things that can be done. And, you know, that's one of the things that we're teaching our members right now. We're going to be taking that forward, getting people to be less afraid, but to believe in their own selves, their families, their communities, and working. Because really, we are an international family. That's how I see it. I've made so many friends with people. I communicate with people every day around the world. And people are people, you know. And I don't care what country they're from or what language they speak. We're all members of the human family at the end of the day. And we've got far more that unites us than that which divides us. We just got to see that common ground approach.
Yeah, that's the thing that they despise the most is they do not want us having culture. They do not want us having identity, because all of these things provide the human spirit something to resist for. These things become our whys. And as much as they want to pretend that we are nothing more than hackable animals, we can be culled and bred and manufactured. That's the human factor that they can never, ever take into account, which is why they will always fail every single time, whether it's fascism, communism, or globalism. It's all the same isms. It's all the same attempt to destroy us culturally and individually. And I think that really rocked Canadians when Trudeau came out and said that Canadians have absolutely no core identity. And I think Canadians are starting to find it. And I wanted to bring this up, you know, specifically because, and this ties into some other things that we've discussed even throughout here already, you know, in talking with people from outside of our country, it's something that we can agree upon. Even Canadians actually even do have their own language. It might be English, but we have so many different things that make us regionally unique that have become into our language. So this is one of those things that defines us as having our own identity. We do have our own language. We say things like a boat, like these, there's so many of these things. You say maple syrup and people go, what's that anywhere else in the world? All of these things. But the one thing that I think that people need to be proud of, and I think that this gets lost in the fog of that searching, trying to connect with our own identity. There's so many things that, although we have had diversities of influence, they have helped us create our own identity. And I want to give kudos to you. And because every time you bring up the word Scottish Highlander, I cannot lie, Jim, I get a shiver goes up my arms and my spine because of one memory that I have on a forced march 25 miles, and we were 10 miles away from our destination, and who met us coming over the hill but a Highland bagpiper. And I'll tell you, I have never been so exhausted in my entire life, but yet so energized and just wound. And these are the things that only happen when you have a cultural identity. These are the things that you connect to at the human level. And I 100% agree. We're fighting for humanity. I'm not just fighting for Canada. I am fighting for all of us so that we can experience those things, so that we're not all wearing the same clothes, eating the same porridge, saying the same words, taking our 2 minutes of hate on a Friday afternoon. These are the things that we have to grasp and embrace. But the last point that I want to make there, and I'll let you touch on some of this, was that you talked about the Canadian convoy
Mhm,
inspiring the rest of the world.
mhm,
That is a key foundational point about Canada's core identity. I think the world needs to be reminded of is when Canadians
mhm.
in our short history stand up and say enough is enough, the rest of the world has followed every single time. Not when the governments do, but when the Canadian people do. And this is just another example of that. Going back to World War One, any point
Mhm.
in time when Canadians stood up, the rest of the world did too. Because I think it's one of those things. Holy shit! The Canadians finally got mad enough to do something. We better get on. We better get busy. Can't let them them northern hillbillies show us up. So that's just my take on some of these things that connect us all, but yet identify us.
I've got to say, I love the Canadian people. They are spirited people. They're tough. When they get going, boy, watch out, you know. And I've made so many friends over there. In fact, there was a lot of Canadians came across, and I met them in the Netherlands, and there was some in Geneva as well. And it was great to. And some of the ones that came to Geneva for that event that I went to, I hadn't actually met before. I'd talked to them plenty of times. So it was. We're building bridges all around the world, and when people realize, and you quite correctly said, you called it when you said that the globalists have attacked humanity itself. I believe they've done it quite deliberately. They want to transform what it means to be human into something, some kind of tech, some kind of humanity 2.0 that they can control. They've talked about doing away with democracy altogether, doing away with elections. We are living in, I guess, the final chapter of human history. And unfortunately, it's the globalists that are supposedly in power. But I actually wonder about that. You know, you talked about something earlier on when you mentioned build back better. And I remember watching that when Boris Johnson, British Prime Minister, was saying it. And we had Jacinda Ardern, who was the Premier in New Zealand, saying it. We had Dan Andrews. We had all these people, Trudeau. I mean,
Bush,
everywhere. Biden was saying it.
Trudeau, all of them.
All of them, right? And they were all saying it at exactly the same time. And it occurred to me, what power is it that's out there that can control kings and presidents and prime ministers and get them all to deliver that exact same narrative at exactly the same time? I'm not sure I have the answer to that, Wayne. But there's something about that. And there's also something about UN Agenda 2030. They seem to be obsessed with having 15-minute smart cities, central bank digital currencies, digital ID, locking everybody down and turning this beautiful planet into a prison planet, all by the year 2030. We're only 6 years away from it.
Yeah.
What is it that they're really afraid of? Is there something about to happen? Is the Great Awakening? Is there a great lifting of the veil? Are we going to see people realize what their true destiny and what it really means to be human? Is that what they really fear? I don't know. I don't think I have all the answers on that, but I do find it curious. Way.
I don't have all the answers, but I think that we look at things and try to explain them from the context of our lifetime. And that's one thing that the globalists have been very good at is preparing generationally. And I don't think that it's, there was a Jacob Rothschild had been made a statement sometime a year and a half ago, saying that if we don't win in Ukraine, it's the end of the new world, the one world international rules based order, and that's that other term
Mhm,
that just triggers me every time. And
mhm,
and I think it's more than that, Jim. I think that these guys, I look at the evolutions of history. The first guys that had the bow and arrows did the conquesting. The first guys that had the cannons did the conquesting. The first guys that that had airplanes did the conquesting. Every time there's an advancement in technology, one side or the other seeks to leverage conquest out of that until there is parity. Then they don't want to fight anymore because then they both got equal to lose. And I think that
mhm,
this what we are seeing here in the last 50 years post World War II was their next iteration of taking advantage of the technology that they were developing for their world conquest. They all want to rule the world, and I think that's what the development of the internet and the communications capability was allowed them to take their mission to scale on a planetary level. And I think that more so than just fighting over the economy or territory, now they genuinely see the end of not just generations, but a couple of millennia of their efforts and investment as we get to this point of parity where we realize nobody needs them anymore. We can build, create, communicate, and do every single thing that we need, and that threatens their control and power. And if we don't need their money, their carrots, if we don't need their slave wages, then they have nothing else to build upon or to use to divide and conquer anymore. So I think that there's a multi-generational and even a millennial battle that is coming to its crescendo right here this year. And I think it's kind of a bit of an anomaly that half the world's population is all voting in the same year.
It's an interesting one, that, isn't it? I must
It
admit,
is.
I noticed that as well. But I mean, when all is said and done, I think that there is definitely a shift taking place. There is a consciousness that is becoming. People are becoming a lot more aware than there will always be people that just are happy with their little lives where they have a semblance of normality, I guess, or they go to the football game or they go to the pub or whatever it might be. But I think increasingly people are waking up to the fact that they could have so much more. And instead of the 1% controlling all the wealth of the other 99%, I think we need to see a little bit more fairness. We need to see a little bit more. But until they are basically made to capitulate or forced out, things won't ever change. But I think as they start to get panicky, that's where we're likely to see conflicts taking place, because it's a huge distraction. And of course, they'll rally the troops and they'll get the countries all mobilized. But actually, if you understand what really is motivating it, because it's never them that send their sons and daughters to die in these pointless wars, it's always everybody else. And then they have to deal with the aftermath of it while they sit at home counting their coins.
They're all partying it up in Kiev right now. All of the rich people's kids over there.
Yeah.
So there just had something actually fairly interesting for me to ask you, but it disappeared on me. But that's all right. So to kind of we're getting close to an hour here. So in your time traveling around Europe over the last while, you've been over there a lot since we spoke last. Uh,
Mhm.
what are you getting as far as for an impression from the people that you're meeting? Obviously, probably mostly on our side of the fence, but are you seeing a lot more optimism? Are you seeing my innate understanding is I know their side isn't growing, ours is, but what I'm
Mm.
concerned with is the optimism and the level of confidence in moving forward in some of this. And one of the reasons why I say this is I think that, we tend to measure things in our lifetime success or defeats. I
Mm.
think, as we've described here, if we're fighting for humanity versus looking at it as fighting for a victory of changing a butt in a seat. I think when we
Mm.
change our perspective of how we measure victories, and if we
Mm.
measure them on the scale, does this save humanity or does this just change this butt in the seat? It makes it
Mm.
easier to accept that victory may not come in our lifetime. And whatever faith that we have or may have out there, if we accept that they will win, our faith will win. In my case, it's God wins. It just doesn't have to be in my lifetime. It makes me far more prepared to deal with the things and the work that it takes instead of expecting some superhero Marvel comic guy or an easy button to solve these things. If we measure our victories not just by changing a button in a seat, but is this a victory for humanity? I think that's kind of where what will be the final thing that will end the globalists forever.
The globalists like people to think that they're all powerful.
Mhm.
And yes, they've got power there. And there is a controlling mind, Wayne, that is behind what they're doing. It's a very, I would say, a very evil, very sinister, controlling mind. But at the end of the day, I am a man of faith. I'm not particularly, I would never describe myself as being religious, but I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in God. And I tell you, there is powers at work. I've seen things in my life that cannot be easily explained. I've seen a lot of things. There is no doubt in my mind that we are finally approaching a period of time where there will be chaos, there will be war, there will be problems, but we've got to get through that. And one of the things that I'm finding with these wonderful people that I'm meeting, whether it's in Denmark, whether it's in the Netherlands, whether it's in Switzerland or France or Germany or Norway or wherever it is, there is hope. There is that eternal burning flame of hope. And when I come across these people and I explain to them what it is we're doing within Freedom Train International, it's almost an instant reaction because they sometimes haven't heard of it, or maybe they've heard about it, that they don't fully understand it. So we are doing a sort of a multi-spectrum way of dealing with what's actually likely to be coming towards the end of this year, and then going into 2025, and then in that final stretch to 2030, that the globalists say they're going to lock us all down. But something, at the end of the day, the way they control is through fear.
Yeah.
And when we lose the fear, that's when we start to see behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. You see who it is. They're not all powerful. They don't have all the power. They don't have all the answers. The universe is watching, and they're watching us as individuals. What we do and how we do it, we will have to give an account of ourselves at some future point. And I don't ever want to get to the point where I'm being judged and they say, well, what did you do? I want to say, well, I did my best. That alone won't save you. Only the blood of the cross of Christ on the cross will save you. But I'll tell you something now. What we do matters. And I'm a fighter, and I will keep fighting for humanity to the best of my ability now and between now and 2030, and perhaps beyond that even as well. But I have to say, it's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure to see you again, Wayne. We will need to meet sometime.
Absolutely. Actually, I've kind of relocated across the great expanse of this country to a place where it might be a little bit easier to meet the next time you come by. If you're in Ontario, I will make it a mission to absolutely. I need to shake your hand. I think that we're in a bit of a way, we're kindred spirits. We have that understanding of what it's like to fight, what it's like to be a warrior, what war and conflict actually looks like. But I'm way happier being a gardener. That I am happy. I am proud to do. And in this day and age, I cannot think of anything that could be more proud to do than to not be that warrior, but to be to be a gardener. So.
Yeah,
Much
fantastic.
gratitude for everything that you're doing, Jim, and thank you so much. And everything else that you're doing to find an hour to squeeze in here to do this with me here today. We're getting down to the last minute here. What's the last things you want everybody to hear? I want to make sure that everybody, nobody leaves my show feeling like they forgot to get something out. Last thoughts for everybody out there today, Jim. We're gonna have to do this a little bit more often, I think.
You tell me, I'll always make time for you, Wayne, that's for sure.
Fantastic. Appreciate that.
But I would say to people out there, don't be afraid. Be prepared, not scared. Don't be worried about the future, because that's how they control you. Look towards yourselves. Come on board with Freedom Train International. Follow Wayne on his podcast. He's talking a lot of sense. He's at the cutting edge as well. Follow people that tell the truth, but ultimately believe and hope for the future, because there's a great hope there. We are winning the information war, and hopefully we will win the battle that lies ahead as well. So I would say to you, it's been a great pleasure to meet all of you. Once again, I love the Canadian people, and thank you to all of you out there who follow me from Canada, who like and share and contribute to the message that we're trying to get out. I am deeply humbled and very grateful to each and every one of you.
And for anybody that's out there, you will find all of the connections for Jim in the show link below. As you get to see this, I encourage everybody to get plugged in. Just start with that. Just get plugged in and know that you're not alone. You don't have to be afraid. There's probably one of us a lot closer than you might imagine. imagine. So thanks so much again, Jim, for your time here. And I really, really look forward to chatting again real soon. So thanks again.
Been my absolute pleasure, Wayne. Thank you so much indeed.
All right. God bless. Stay strong. Stay mighty, my fellow patriots and hostages. We'll see you tomorrow.